The Forbidden Forum. It was a rainy night when Lucas, a 21-year-old college student, found his way to an unfamiliar forum on the dark web. He was used to wandering the internet's digital alleys, curious about the limits he could push. But this time, he had gone too far. A mixture of boredom and adrenaline led him to click on a link that promised something far beyond what any site on the surface web could offer. The forum had no name, just an encrypted URL address that flashed on the screen. The layout was simple, with no elaborate images or graphics, just a series of topics with strange and unsettling titles. Forbidden experiments, witnesses to the supernatural, ancient rituals, the chosen. What caught his attention was a post pinned to the top with the title, The True Darkness. Below the title, just one sentence: enter if you dare, but know that there is no turning back. Welcome to the channel where every story could be the last. Here we tell the darkest and most disturbing stories. If you like to feel that chill down your spine, subscribe now. Activate the bell so you don't miss any chilling stories and share them with your brave friends. Get ready, because the next story could be yours. Lucas hesitated for a moment. He knew that the dark web was a dangerous place where the line between reality and absurdity became blurred, where the limits of morality and law were ignored. But his curiosity was uncontrollable. He clicked the link. When entering the topic, a black screen took over his monitor. For a moment, he thought the site was frozen, but soon a message appeared. You have been selected to participate in a game. Your entry has been accepted. The clock has started. Before Lucas could react, a countdown appeared at the top of the page: midnight. A 24-hour timer had been started, but he had no idea what would happen at the end of that time. Something about this situation felt too real. Lucas tried to close the browser, but the page was unresponsive. He clicked the X repeatedly, trying to get out, but nothing happened. The screen remained black, except for the clock that continued to tick. Then, a new message appeared. You can't leave. The game has already started. He tried turning off the computer, but that didn't work either. The power button was unresponsive, as if his computer was under the control of another force. He began to feel panic rising in his chest. What had he done? What game was this? Suddenly, a new window opened in the center of the screen. It was a live video broadcast. The camera showed a dark, dimly lit room where a hooded figure sat in front of an altar covered in candles. The person wore a leather mask that completely covered his face. The only visible part was the eyes, glowing with a cold intensity. The figure began to speak in a deep, distorted voice. You made your choice, Lucas. Now, you are one of us. The clock is ticking. You have 24 hours to survive the game. If you don't, you will be hunted just like the others. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. Who were the others? He had no idea what was happening, but fear gripped him. The video windows started showing multiple screens, all from different people. Some were faces that looked confused, others were crying, and some were completely still, their expressions blank. He realized that these people were being watched, and now he was one of them. Your next instructions will come soon. Prepare yourself, Lucas. This is just the beginning. The transmission was interrupted, and he was left alone with the timer that continued to count. Every second that passed felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that time was running out. Lucas felt a pang of nausea as he tried to process what had just happened. He was trapped in a deadly game, and apparently there was no way to escape. He looked around his room, feeling like he was being watched. Fear was growing in his mind, and he realized he had no choice but to move forward. He decided to investigate the forum further. Maybe there was a way out, some flaw in the system he could exploit. But the more he explored, the darker the content became. The posts were macabre, detailing horrific experiences of others who had played the game. Some said they had been chased by shadows, others spoke of whispering voices that followed them wherever they went. One user reported seeing his own death in a dream, only to wake up and find marks on his body as if he had been attacked. Each story was more disturbing than the last, but none of them offered a solution. Everyone was trapped, just like him. Suddenly, a new notification appeared on his monitor. Challenge 1, survive the night. The message was simple but terrifying. Lucas began to hear strange sounds coming from outside his window. Soft footsteps, as if someone was walking slowly down the building's hallway. He got up, locked the door, and closed the curtains, trying to block out anything that was outside. But the sounds didn't stop. The clock on the website continued to tick, and with every second that passed, he felt more trapped. Time seemed to drag by, and Lucas was increasingly certain that he was not alone. Hours passed. Lucas was awake, every nerve in his body on high alert. The footsteps outside had stopped, but the silence was even more frightening. It was then that his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. "You're doing well, Lucas. But the real test is yet to come." He felt a shiver. Who was sending you these messages? How did they know what he was doing? The clock on the site said 3 o'clock in the morning. He knew something was about to happen. The monitor light blinked, and live video turned on again. The hooded figure was back, but this time it wasn't alone. Beside him, there was a woman tied to a chair. Her eyes were blindfolded, and she looked terrified. "This is the next level, Lucas. You must make a choice. If you want to survive, you will have to sacrifice someone. This woman is just the beginning. Soon, you will have to decide between your life or hers." The camera focused on the woman's face. She was shaking, her body rigid with fear. Lucas felt a wave of panic. What should he do? He didn't know that woman, but the idea of being responsible for her death was unbearable. "Time is ticking, Lucas. Choose wisely." The hooded figure's voice echoed in his head. He tried to think of a way out, but his mind was clouded with fear. The clock continued to tick, each second a reminder of the growing pressure. He knew that, in some way, he was being tested, and the decision he made would define his destiny. The woman in the chair began to sob, her pleas muffled by the gag covering her mouth. Lucas looked at the timer, 18 hours. He still had time, but he knew the worst was yet to come. The broadcast ended abruptly, leaving Lucas in a state of shock. He was trapped in a digital nightmare, and the only way out seemed to be to play the game, but at what cost? The clock ticked on, and Lucas felt like he was being watched, pursued by something he couldn't see. The lights in his apartment flickered occasionally, and he knew the real terror had not yet begun. But what he didn't know was that, over the next few hours, he would face horrors beyond imagination, where the line between the real and the virtual would completely disintegrate. The next few hours dragged on like an eternity. Lucas was on edge, his senses heightened, and every sound in the apartment seemed amplified. The silence was broken only by the occasional drip from the kitchen sink or the gentle crackle of the wind against the windows. But there was something more. Something invisible and oppressive, as if the very air around him was heavy, charged with an unwanted presence. At 5 a.m., another notification appeared on the screen. It was a new message, short but disturbing. You survived the first night, but the true darkness has not yet come. Lucas felt a mix of relief and dread. He had passed the first test, but he knew this was just the beginning. The clock continued to tick. Now there were less than 19 hours left. What else would he have to face? He tried to get help. He picked up the phone and tried to call the police, but there was no signal. The internet outside the forum was also inaccessible. All his attempts to communicate with the outside world were blocked, as if he were being kept in a digital maze with no way out. It was then that he noticed something strange. In the corner of the room, a dark stain appeared on the wall. It was small at first, but it began to slowly expand, like a liquid shadow spreading. Lucas rubbed his eyes, believing his mind was playing tricks on him. But the stain continued to grow, and soon it formed a silhouette, the figure of a person. He could clearly see someone's shadow, but there was no one there. A shiver ran down his spine. Panic began to overcome him as he slowly rose from his chair and backed away, his eyes fixed on the shadow that continued to form. The silhouette seemed to move, as if it was trying to get out of the wall. Then, a dark, deformed hand emerged from the shadow, scratching the surface of the wall with long, sharp nails. Lucas stumbled back, his heart racing. He tried to run to the door, but it was locked. He pulled the handle desperately, but it was useless. The sound of something dragging behind him made his hair stand on end. When he looked over his shoulder, he saw the shadowy figure completely emerge from the wall, its eyes glowing with a dim red light. It was as if darkness itself had taken shape. The figure made no sound, just slowly advancing towards him. Lucas, panicked, ran to the other side of the room, trying to find anything he could use as a weapon. He grabbed a lamp and threw it towards the shadow, but it went through the creature without any effect. It was as if the shadow was made of pure emptiness, something immaterial, impossible to stop. He heard a loud, metallic noise coming from his computer. When he looked at the screen, there was a new message flashing. You are being watched. Don't resist. The game continues. Lucas, with no way out, ran to the bathroom, locking himself inside. His ears picked up the sound of footsteps on the other side of the door. Something was walking around the apartment, but he couldn't see it. Breathing heavily, he crouched down, huddled in the corner of the small room, with the lights flickering above him. Suddenly, the sound of a faint knock echoed from the bathroom door. 1, 2, 3 knocks. Slowly. As if the thing outside was playing with him, waiting for the right moment to enter. Luke. He froze. The voice on the other end was the same as the hooded figure in the video. That cold, distorted voice seemed to be just inches away from him. You can't hide forever. Time is running out. Despair took over Lucas as he questioned how he had gotten himself into this situation. He needed to think, needed to find a way out of there, but the fear was overwhelming. He felt like cornered prey, awaiting the final blow. And then, the timer on the website changed. Now there were 12 hours left. Time was running out quickly, and Lucas knew he needed to act soon. Suddenly, the bathroom light went out completely, leaving him in absolute darkness. The sound of heavy breathing filled the air, but it wasn't yours. It was something or someone. Lucas frantically felt around, looking for anything to defend himself with. When his fingers touched the door handle, he felt something cold grab his wrist. A feeling of intense cold passed through his body, as if death itself was holding him. He screamed and pulled his arm with all his might, but the ghostly hand held him tight. The thing's touch wasn't physical, it was as if it was draining his energy, his will to fight. Choose. The voice sounded once again, reverberating in his mind. Lucas was about to pass out when the bathroom light flickered back on, and the hand disappeared. He fell to the ground, sweating and panting. The sound at the door stopped. Everything was quiet again. He looked at the timer on the website. 11 hours and 30 minutes. Lucas knew he couldn't just stand there. He needed to find out what was going on. He returned to the computer, his hands shaking as he typed frantically, searching for any clue, any answer. Then he found a hidden section of the forum where several other people who participated in the game left desperate messages. "They're coming for me. I don't have any more time. The shadow, it won't stop until I make the sacrifice. The only way out is to choose. Either me or them." Each message seemed more desperate than the last. Lucas realized that they were all trapped in the same cycle as him, a trap with no way out. But then, he found a different message from someone named Raphael. "If you're reading this, it means you've been caught too. Listen carefully, the only way to get out alive is to break the cycle. Don't make the sacrifice. Don't let them control your choices. If you survive next night, there will be a chance. A small one, but it's all we have." Lucas felt a small spark of hope. Maybe there was a way out of there. He just needed to survive one more night. But at the same time, he knew the shadow would return. And next time, maybe it wouldn't be so forgiving. The hours that followed seemed endless. Every second felt like an eternity, and Lucas knew the shadow would return. He would need to be ready this time. Raphael's message had given him a small glimmer of hope, but also a terrible certainty he would have to face that thing again. The apartment was quiet, but the atmosphere seemed charged with negative energy. Lucas felt like he was being watched all the time, even when there was nothing visible around him. With every crack of wood, with every breath of wind that shook the windows, he wondered if it was the shadow returning. Sitting in front of his computer, he frantically typed on the forum, trying to find more information. But it seemed like most of the threads were from people who, like him, were desperate, looking for a way out. He knew that most of them had not survived. The messages stopped abruptly, leaving a trail of agony and fear. It was then that a new notification appeared on the screen. Challenge 2, the choices start now. Lucas's eyes widened, his heart racing. Another challenge? He wasn't sure what that meant, but it couldn't be a good thing. However, before he could think about it any further, his cell phone vibrated on the table. It was an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. On the other side, a female voice, cold but calm, began to speak. "Lucas, you're getting closer to the truth. But before you can leave, you need to make a choice." "Who are you?" Lucas asked, his voice shaking. "Someone who has been where you are now. I know this game, Lucas. It consumes, destroys, and you only get out one way, by playing until the end." The female voice was mesmerizing, but it carried a dark, almost apathetic tone. Lucas could feel that she spoke with knowledge, as if she had experienced the same torture he now faced. "What do you mean by choices? What kind of game is this?" Lucas questioned, his heart racing. "There are things you shouldn't have seen, things that are beyond our understanding. Now, they see you. But you still have a chance. In the end, it all comes down to sacrifice. Either you sacrifice, or you are sacrificed. Choose wisely. The call dropped before Lucas could ask further. He looked at his cell phone, breathing heavily. What did she mean by sacrifices? The forum didn't say anything about it, and no one had mentioned this woman before. Who was she? And why did it seem so familiar to the situation he found himself in? Before he could compose himself, the computer began to blink. The screen went black for a moment, and when it came back, a new message appeared. Challenge 2, save or damn. Make your choice. Below the message, 2 images appeared on the screen, both showing people Lucas didn't know. The first was of a middle-aged man with a tired expression and eyes that seemed to be begging for help. The second was of a young woman, perhaps in her 20s, who appeared to be in some kind of captivity, with her wrists tied and marks of dried blood on her arms. Lucas swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision before him. The message on the forum now made sense. He had to choose who to save. What he didn't know was what the other's fate would be. That's crazy, he whispered to himself, his fingers shaking as they hovered over the keyboard. He tried leaving the page, closing the browser, but nothing worked. It was as if the computer was frozen, forcing him to make the choice. Time was running, and a clock appeared in the top corner of the screen, marking a 10-minute countdown. Lucas felt his panic rising. He needed to decide soon, but how? He didn't know any of those people. How could he condemn someone for no reason? But also, how could he choose who would live or die? Every second seemed to weigh on his mind. He stood up, pacing back and forth across the small apartment, his eyes constantly flicking back to the clock. Almost as if it were a reflex, he returned to the forum to try to seek help, but no one responded. All threads were strangely silent, as if the forum itself was waiting for your decision. As time passed, he began to feel pressure in his temples. An intense headache began to throb, as if the passing time was also draining his mental energy. He sat down at the computer again, with only 5 minutes left. His mind started racing. Maybe he could save them both, or maybe, if he didn't choose, the game would end there. But he knew deep down that none of that was true. Whatever was behind that macabre game wanted to see him decide, wanted to manipulate him, wanted him to feel the weight of condemning someone. "I can't do this," he repeated to himself in a whisper. But time didn't wait. With 3 minutes remaining, he looked at the 2 images once more. The middle-aged man had desperate eyes, as if he already knew what was about to happen. The young woman, on the other hand, seemed to be unconscious, perhaps not even knowing that her life was at risk. Lucas felt his hands sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. 2 minutes left. He thought about what the woman said on the phone. Sacrifices. Could this be the key? Was it possible that, by making the decision, he was condemning himself rather than freeing someone else? Nothing made sense. But he knew that if he did nothing, they would both die. That's what that game wanted, destruction. 1 minute left. Lucas approached the screen, his hands shaking. The headache was now unbearable. He knew he couldn't escape this choice. Breathing heavily, his fingers touched the mouse. The countdown was in its final seconds. He clicked on the image of the young woman. The clock reset, and the screen went black. Lucas sat back in his chair, exhausted, expecting the worst. But for a moment, nothing happened. Silence enveloped him, and he almost allowed himself to believe it was all over. But then, a new message appeared on the screen. You made your choice. She will live for now. Lucas felt momentary relief, but soon regret hit him. He had condemned the man. Who was he? What was his story? He would never know. The game forced him to carry this guilt, this responsibility for something he didn't fully understand. Before I could fully process what had happened, a new notification appeared. Challenge 3, are you ready to discover the truth? Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control his breathing. He knew there was no easy way out. The game was far from over, and each step took him deeper into the abyss. Each choice took him a little further away from reality and brought him closer to insanity. He looked at the clock, which now read midnight. The silence around him seemed heavier than ever, as if the very air was charged with an evil presence, invisible but always there, watching his every move. Raphael still hadn't responded to his last message, and Lucas began to doubt whether he would be able to get out of this nightmare. What would come next? How many more people would he have to convict? And what was waiting for him at the end of it all? The computer blinked again, but this time, it wasn't a text message. A video started playing. The image was grainy, almost unrecognizable, but little by little Lucas was able to make out a familiar figure. It was him. He was watching himself, sitting in front of the computer, just as he was now. No, he whispered, standing up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. But the video continued. The camera seemed to be somewhere on the ceiling of the apartment, filming his every move. He looked around, trying to identify where the video was being recorded from, but he couldn't see anything. Then, a new figure appeared in the video, emerging from the shadow behind Lucas. It was a tall, slender shadow with red eyes that glowed in the dark. Lucas felt terror take over his body, unable to move as he watched the figure approaching him in the video. And before he could react, a loud knock echoed through his apartment door. No. The shadow was there. Did you like this story? I left another scary story here on the card, click on it. Do you have something incredible to share? If you or someone you know has had a hair-raising experience, send your story. Who knows, it might appear in our next video. Share your story in the comments or by email, and let's explore the mysteries of your story together.